Hi there. So today I want to talk about innovation at the level of the firm or the organization. Could be public organization, a non-profit, whatever. And I really just want to spend a few minutes laying out a kind of piece of theory about the micro foundations of innovation and change in organizations. So here's some kind of key ideas, and I'll post a short document that summarizes these ideas in Coach's Corner. So the first big idea is that firms don't exist in isolation. They are part of an ecosystem. So my company, for example, is a small tech company. We are part of a network of tech companies. We provide services to clients like Alberta Health, ATB, Reach Edmonton, all sorts of organizations. And in doing that, we interact with all sorts of components of our ecosystem. We interact with suppliers, with distributors, with competitors, with customers, with regulators, with unions, with inventors and innovators who approach us all the time with have you thought of, or how about adding, or whatever it may be. So these interactions shape the ecosystem that we're part of. And these interactions create what's known as dynamic capabilities within the organizational firm. And there are essentially three kinds of dynamic capabilities. One of them is what might be called affordances, or idiosyncratic adjustments made to a core product to meet the needs of a particular circumstance by one of our technicians or one of my colleagues. So it's a one-off little change that really solves a problem for that client at that time. The second kind is called empirical sensitivities. So we've gone from an kind of idiosyncratic adjustment to a product or a service to saying, actually, that change would benefit all of our clients. So now let's use this evidence that this really works to change something that we do. I'll give you an example. One of our products is a video recording system for wealth management interviews within ATB. And the idea for that came from some work we were doing with a large NHL organization using video for sharing ideas and information with players, and between players and other players, and between players and coaches. And all sorts of small adjustments were made to accommodate the Oilers that then found its way into that platform for all of our clients around the world. So, affordances, idiosyncratic changes, leading to what's known as empirical sensitivities, which make changes to products right across the board. And then the final kind of change is what's known in the literature as habitus, but what I prefer to call organizational culture. Now, I've said before, I've quoted Peter Drucker's comment that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I think that's absolutely right. Organizational cultures drive and shape behaviors, and the culture comes from the combination of all these interactions in the ecosystem and the affordances and empirical sensitivities. So, organizational culture will either allow a lot of empirical sensitivities and change, or it will make them extremely difficult. Now, these features of organizations are also linked to leadership characteristics, and you've read the book I wrote with Don Simpson about Renaissance leadership. But I think in the context that we're now working in, of kind of beginning to think about the post-pandemic world, we also need to think about the psychological capital of leaders of organizations, in particular, whether they demonstrate positive psychological capital. And there are four elements to that in the work of Luthans that we should really think about. Does the leader demonstrate hope and ambition for the opportunity? Are they kind of positive about the future? Are they optimistic about not just the future, but about a particular project or a particular change? Do they demonstrate resilience and adaptability? And do they have strong sense of who they are and a kind of sense of self-efficacy? So these all tie into the Renaissance leadership characteristics, but I think they're critical in terms of building this dynamic capability for change. So that's the kind of frame, and that leads to us trying to understand, particularly from a theoretical point of view, but also from a research point of view, just what the dynamic capabilities of companies look like. And there are essentially three things. One is, do they demonstrate over time evolutionary fitness? Can they adapt and adjust and flow differently so as to respond to local circumstances? A great example is the restaurant trade, which I grew up in. If you have the same menu now to the one you had in 1950, you wouldn't be there. Chefs adjust to new understandings of ingredients, new understandings of recipes, new understanding of customers and customer taste, new understandings of wine pairings and all this kind of stuff. And they demonstrate, if they're still there after 10 years, because most restaurants fail within the first 3 years, 60% fail in 3 years in Canada. If they're still there after a decade, it does demonstrate that they have this evolutionary fitness as a restaurant. The second thing is, do they have entrepreneurial fitness? Can they respond not simply to having to adjust the business and adapt, but to really new opportunities? So you take somebody like Gordon Ramsay in the restaurant trade, who has gone from owning just one restaurant in Chelsea in London to owning a couple of hundred around the world, but also being a mega TV star. And that entrepreneurial spirit that he's demonstrated and shown is quite remarkable. And you may or may not like him. That's not the point. The point is he's a real entrepreneur. So firms develop evolutionary fitness, entrepreneurial fitness, and then the third thing they develop is technical fitness to be able to sustain the developments that the other two conditions create. Now, all of this defines the dynamic capabilities of a firm or organization, defines whether they have what's known as absorption capabilities. If a big new invention comes along, or a big new innovation, such as the use of analytics in healthcare, or the use of AI for diagnostics in healthcare, or the use of AI for other kind of things like 3D manufacturing for cars, how nimble is the organization? How able is it to absorb that opportunity and run with it in the context of its own ecosystem? So these are some kind of big ideas I wanted to share because I think they create a kind of agenda for our look at innovation inside the firm. Hope you're having a good week. Talk soon.